Chapter 1. The Birth of a Queen. Long before Atlantis became the kingdom of legend, its shores were quiet, the waters calm, and the city was but a dream in the hearts of the gods. The queen's story began in the early days of Atlantis, long before she was crowned. She was born in a hidden sanctuary deep beneath the ocean, far from the reach of mortals and even the gods themselves. She was the daughter of the high priestess, Erin, and a powerful ocean spirit. Her name was Lysandra, a name whispered by the waves, as if even the sea knew the greatness she was destined to achieve. From the moment she opened her eyes, Lysandra's beauty was unmatched. Her skin glowed like the pearlescent glow of coral reefs, and her eyes sparkled like the deepest pools of the ocean. But even more remarkable than her beauty was the innate strength that radiated from her soul. She wasn't like the other children of Atlantis, fragile and innocent. She was fierce, sharp-witted, and already her power over the waters was evident. She would speak to the sea like it was a living entity, calming its storms or stirring its waves with nothing but a gesture. Her mother, Erin, saw the potential in her daughter early on and began teaching her the ancient ways of Atlantis, lessons of leadership, the wisdom of the ocean, and the power that came from understanding its deepest secrets. Lysandra wasn't just a child to be protected. She was destined to rule. She had the blood of the ancients in her veins, a lineage of gods and spirits who once governed the seas. As she grew older, her understanding of the currents, the tides, and the creatures that roamed the depths became unparalleled. The city of Atlantis, a place of wonder and beauty, had been built by the hands of kings and queens before, but it was still far from the kingdom it would one day become. There was peace on the surface, but in the shadows, darkness was beginning to creep in. Factions of power-hungry nobles had risen, each seeking control over the vast wealth of the city. The kingdom was fragile, and in its fragility, a storm was beginning to brew. At the age of 16, Lysandra's training took a new turn. Her mother began to prepare her for something far greater than the role of a princess. She would be the queen, but not just any queen. Lysandra would be the heart of Atlantis, the woman who would unite the city's fractured people and lead them with the strength of the ocean itself. One day, while standing on the edge of Atlantis's great palace, Lysandra gazed out over the vast expanse of water that stretched into eternity. The ocean was calling to her, urging her to embrace her destiny. She felt the power surge within her veins, the power that was her birthright. And she knew deep within her heart that she was ready. The path before her, however, was not an easy one. Atlantis was on the brink of war. A coup was brewing in the royal courts, and the whispers of treachery filled the air like the salt of the sea. Lysandra was not just about to inherit the throne. She was about to inherit a battle that would decide the fate of her people. Her mother, Erin, had long warned her that the true test of a queen was not in ruling with beauty or grace, but in ruling with wisdom, strength, and courage. "The waters of Atlantis will test you, Lysandra," Erin had said, "but they will also reveal the truth of your heart. Only then will you know if you're ready." And so Lysandra's journey began. The ocean, once calm and peaceful, was now churning with a storm of uncertainty, but she stood tall, her heart set on the destiny that awaited her. Chapter 2. The storm brews. The days that followed were filled with whispers and tension in the air. The city of Atlantis, once a shining beacon of peace and prosperity, now felt like a powder keg, ready to explode. The nobles, hungry for power, began to clash openly, and the royal court, once united in purpose, was now divided. There was talk of betrayal, of alliances formed in shadows, and of the overthrow of the old order. In the midst of it all, Lysandra's resolve only grew stronger. Her mother, the high priestess Erin, watched her daughter with growing concern. Though Lysandra was powerful beyond measure, she was still young, and the burden of leadership was not something to be taken lightly. Erin knew that the forces at play in Atlantis were not just political, they were supernatural too. The magic that flowed through the city was ancient and volatile, and it could either protect or destroy. One evening, as Lysandra sat in the grand hall of the palace, her mother approached her, her steps heavy with the weight of unspoken words. "You are ready," Erin said quietly, her voice carrying the depth of years of wisdom and experience. "But there is a darkness here, one that you must understand before you take the throne." Lysandra turned to her mother, her eyes filled with questions. "What do you mean, Mother? What darkness?" Erin's gaze hardened, and for a moment the ocean's power seemed to ripple around them. "There are forces in Atlantis, ancient forces that do not wish for you to rule. They will stop at nothing to prevent you from claiming your birthright. The tides of fate have already begun to turn." Lysandra felt a chill run down her spine, but she refused to show fear. "I have always known that my destiny was not an easy one, Mother. I will face whatever comes." Erin nodded slowly, a hint of pride in her eyes. "You are strong, Lysandra, but strength alone will not save you. You must be wise. You must learn to navigate the currents of power, both in the palace and beyond." The next few days were filled with lessons that went beyond the traditional training of a queen. Erin took Lysandra deep into the sacred temple of Atlantis, where the most ancient and powerful relics were kept. There, hidden in the darkest corners of the city, lay secrets that even the nobility feared to speak of. Lysandra's heart pounded in her chest as her mother led her deeper into the temple's sacred halls. "Here," Erin said, stopping before a large stone tablet etched with symbols of the ocean, "lies the truth of Atlantis. The kingdom was built not only by mortal hands, but by forces far older than anyone realizes." Lysandra stepped forward, her fingers brushing the stone surface. As she did, a surge of magic filled the air, and the symbols seemed to glow with an ethereal light. The ocean's power seemed to hum in response, as if it recognized her presence. "This is the heart of Atlantis," Erin whispered. "It is the source of our strength, the very essence of the kingdom. But it is also a weapon that has the power to destroy as much as it can protect." Lysandra's brow furrowed. "A weapon? But how can we wield such power without risking everything?" Erin's expression was grim. "That is the balance we must strike. The heart of Atlantis must be protected at all costs. There are those who would use it for their own gain, to bring about chaos and destruction. And there are those who would destroy it, to weaken Atlantis and take the throne for themselves." Lysandra's mind raced. The more she learned, the more she realized the magnitude of the forces at play. She was not just fighting for power, she was fighting for the survival of Atlantis itself. On the eve of the Royal Council's gathering, as tensions reached their peak, Lysandra stood before the mirror in her chambers, the weight of her lineage pressing down on her. She had always known that she was meant for greatness, but now, standing on the precipice of war, she understood the true nature of her destiny. She was not just the future of Atlantis. She was its protector, its shield against the coming storm. And the storm was already here. As the royal council convened that night, Lysandra entered the hall with her mother by her side. The nobles, their eyes filled with suspicion and greed, turned to look at her. She could feel their gaze, like daggers, but she stood tall, her eyes unwavering. She would not be intimidated. The whispers grew louder as Lysandra took her place at the center of the room. The time had come for her to claim her birthright, to take her place as Queen of Atlantis. But as she looked around the room, she could sense something dark looming, an unseen force, a shadow in the heart of the council. In that moment, Lysandra knew that the true battle for Atlantis was not just one of power, it was one of trust, of loyalty, and of facing the darkness within the very walls of her kingdom. Chapter 3. The Tide Turns. The moon hung low over the shimmering waters of Atlantis. As Lysandra stood at the palace balcony, looking out over the vast expanse of the ocean, its deep blue surface rippled beneath the weight of a brewing storm, a storm that mirrored the turmoil within her heart. The council meeting had ended in chaos, the nobles' voices rising in protest and anger. They were divided, some willing to support her, others openly defiant, swearing their allegiance to rival factions who had promised them power and wealth. Lysandra had expected opposition, but the intensity of it shook her to the core. Atlantis, her beautiful city, was on the brink of civil war. The palace, once a place of unity and peace, had become a battleground for influence and control. And though her power over the ocean was unmatched, she knew that she was fighting a war far more dangerous than one of magic alone. Her mother, Erin, joined her on the balcony, her presence a calming force amidst the rising storm. The high priestess had always been a steady rock, guiding Lysandra through the most difficult moments of her life. Now, her eyes held the wisdom of ages as she gazed at her daughter. "You've seen their true faces now," Erin said softly. "They will not make this easy for you. The kingdom is fractured, and the old power structures will fight to maintain control." Lysandra nodded, her eyes steely with determination. "I know, but I will not allow them to tear Atlantis apart. The city belongs to the people, not to those who seek to use it for their own gain." Erin placed a hand on Lysandra's shoulder, her grip firm. "Your strength is undeniable, Lysandra. But remember, it is not just your power over the ocean that will save Atlantis. It is your ability to unite its people. You must show them that you are the queen they need, not just the one they fear." Lysandra turned to face her mother, her resolve hardening. "I will show them that I am their queen, but I will not bow to the whims of those who wish to destroy us from within." The next few days were filled with strategy and preparation. Lysandra spent hours alone in the palace's war room, poring over ancient maps of Atlantis and its surrounding territories. She knew that the coup was not just an internal struggle, it was part of something far larger. A hidden enemy was at work, one that had been manipulating the nobles from the shadows, and Lysandra's only hope lay in uncovering the truth before it was too late. It was during a late-night council meeting that Lysandra's suspicions were confirmed. She sat at the head of the table, her eyes scanning the faces of the gathered nobles, their expressions a mix of fear, greed, and barely concealed hostility. Among them sat Lord Calen, a respected noble known for his military expertise, and Lady Seraphine, a powerful and ambitious figure who had long held sway over the city's financial affairs. The two had always been allies, but Lysandra now sensed a deeper connection between them, one that smelled of treachery. "Lord Calen, Lady Seraphine," Lysandra said, her voice steady but laced with an edge of authority. "We need to address the issue of the unrest in the Southern Territories. I trust you both have been in contact with the local commanders." Calen, his face a mask of practiced indifference, nodded. "Yes, Your Majesty. The southern provinces are becoming more restless by the day. They claim the central government has abandoned them, and they have begun to rally for independence." Lysandra's eyes narrowed. "And what are you doing to address this rebellion?" Seraphine spoke next, her voice smooth and calculated. "We are attempting to negotiate with them, but it seems their leaders are growing more obstinate. It is clear that the old order is no longer enough to maintain control." Lysandra's gaze hardened. "And who, pray tell, would benefit from such instability?" The room fell silent, all eyes turning to Calen and Seraphine. The tension was palpable, and Lysandra's instincts told her that the two were hiding something. She pressed further, her tone now sharp. "Lord Calen, Lady Seraphine, do you not find it suspicious that the rebellion has gained such momentum at a time when the kingdom is already divided? It seems too convenient." Calen shifted in his seat, and Seraphine's eyes flickered with something darker, something that suggested they were not mere bystanders in the chaos. "You are mistaken, Your Majesty," Seraphine said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "We are merely trying to stabilize the situation." Lysandra stood up, her voice ringing with power. "Number this is no mere rebellion. This is the work of those who seek to overthrow the throne. You have been playing both sides, feeding the flames of discontent to weaken Atlantis." Calen's expression twisted into a sneer. "And what if we have, Your Majesty? What if we want something more than your weak rule? Atlantis needs a stronger hand to guide it, one that is not bound by the old ways." Lysandra's eyes burned with fury, but she held her ground. "You will not tear my city apart for your own gain. I will fight for Atlantis, and I will fight you." The room erupted into chaos as Lysandra's words hung in the air. The traitors had revealed themselves, but it was too late for them. The war for Atlantis had begun, and Lysandra would stop at nothing to protect her people. Her magic, her strength, and her will would be tested as never before. The storm outside had intensified, the waves crashing violently against the walls of the palace. But Lysandra's heart was calm, for she knew that the tide was turning. She was no longer just a princess, she was the Queen of Atlantis, and she would fight to the death to protect her kingdom. Chapter 4. The Final Tide. The war for Atlantis had come, and with it, the full force of Lysandra's power was unleashed. The city, once a place of peace, now stood on the brink of destruction. The streets that were once filled with laughter and music were now teeming with soldiers, both loyal and rebellious. The sound of marching feet and the clash of weapons echoed through the grand halls of the palace as Lysandra prepared for the final battle that would determine the fate of her kingdom. But the enemy she faced was no ordinary foe. Lord Calen and Lady Seraphine had rallied a powerful coalition of nobles and mercenaries, determined to tear down the monarchy and seize control of Atlantis for themselves. Their armies had already breached the city's outer walls, and now they pressed toward the heart of the kingdom. Lysandra stood at the top of the palace steps, her eyes fixed on the horizon where the smoke of battle rose into the sky. The ocean beneath her seemed to sense the chaos, its waters dark and tumultuous, as if the very currents were in turmoil. But Lysandra's resolve was unwavering. The people of Atlantis had placed their trust in her, and she would not fail them. "Mother," Lysandra said, turning to Aaron, who had stood by her side through every trial, "is it time?" Aaron looked out over the battlefield, her face set in a mask of determination. "The storm is upon us, Lysandra. But remember, you are not alone. The ocean's power flows through you, and with it you can turn the tide." Lysandra nodded, taking a deep breath. The heart of Atlantis, hidden deep beneath the city, was her last hope. It was said that the heart could summon the full force of the ocean, flooding the city or calming its waters, depending on the will of the ruler. Lysandra had always known that she was destined to wield its power, but now, with her kingdom on the line, she understood the true cost of such magic. "You must go to the heart, Lysandra," Aaron said, her voice filled with urgency. "The city's future rests in your hands. You must command the waters to cleanse Atlantis of the traitors." Lysandra's heart beat loudly in her chest, but she knew there was no turning back. She turned and began to walk toward the temple that housed the heart of Atlantis, her steps steady and purposeful. As she descended into the depths of the city, the air grew colder, and the sound of rushing water filled her ears. The power of the ocean thrummed through her veins, and she could feel its ancient magic calling to her. At the center of the temple, the heart of Atlantis stood, a glowing crystal that pulsed with an otherworldly light. The heart was the source of the kingdom's strength, and now Lysandra would unlock its full potential. But as her hands reached out to touch the crystal, she felt a dark presence, the same presence that had been manipulating the nobles all along. A voice, cold and venomous, echoed through her mind. "You are too weak, Lysandra. You are nothing more than a puppet of the ocean. I will take what is mine, and you will be nothing." Lysandra's pulse quickened, but she did not falter. "I am no puppet," she whispered fiercely, her fingers grazing the heart's surface. "I am the Queen of Atlantis, and I will fight for my people." The heart flared with a blinding light, and the ocean responded. The waters of Atlantis surged, flooding the city streets, pushing back the rebel forces with a force they could not withstand. Waves crashed against the palace, dragging the traitors into the depths, their cries swallowed by the sea. But even as the battle raged above, Lysandra remained focused, her hands pressed firmly against the heart. The ocean's power flowed through her, a torrent of strength and magic. With a final, resounding roar, the water calmed. The city fell silent, the echoes of battle fading into the distance. Lysandra, her hands still resting on the heart, stood victorious. She had saved Atlantis, but at a great cost. As the waters receded, the remnants of the rebellion were washed away, and the nobles who had once plotted against her were either drowned or taken prisoner. Atlantis had been cleansed, and Lysandra had proven herself not just as a queen, but as a ruler capable of commanding the very forces that had built her kingdom. When Lysandra emerged from the temple, she was greeted by the people of Atlantis, who had watched in awe as their queen had summoned the power of the ocean to save them. The city was in ruins, but it was theirs to rebuild, and with Lysandra at the helm, there was hope for a new future. Her mother, Erin, stood waiting for her at the palace gates. "You have done it, Lysandra," she said, pride filling her voice. "Atlantis is yours. You are the queen this city needs." Lysandra looked out over her kingdom, the city of Atlantis now bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun. The storm had passed, but the journey ahead would be long. The ocean's power was hers to wield, but it was also a heavy burden. The tides of fate would continue to test her, but Lysandra knew one thing for certain. She would always fight for Atlantis, no matter the cost. And as the first stars began to appear in the sky, Lysandra took her place as the Queen of Atlantis, not just in title, but in spirit. She was the heart of the kingdom, the protector of its people, and the ruler who would lead it into a new era